Hello, all you positive heads out there. Brandon Beecham here. Thanks for tuning into this week's podcast. I am extremely excited on this episode to be speaking with a person who is considered by many to be the top visionary artist on the planet right now, Android Jones. If you haven't had the privilege of seeing Android's artwork, just pause this podcast right now. Go over to androidjones.com. Take a few minutes to check it out before you listen to the rest of this episode. That way you have an idea of, the ridiculous talent that Android possesses. And it'll also give you a context for some of the topics that we're going to be discussing on the episode. So, hello, Android. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I've been definitely looking forward to this ever since I had the pleasure of meeting you actually not too long ago at our mutual friend Shane Garrett's house, maybe a month or so ago. And at that time I got the opportunity to pick your brain a little bit there. And I've really been looking forward to continuing some of the fascinating conversations we started to get into. However, some of that stuff gets pretty deep, so perhaps I should start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, how and when you started down your unique artistic path.
Great. I was born in Boulder, Colorado, and I really gravitate towards art at a really early age. I think people kind of say I've been an artist my whole life. I think my parents and teachers noticed something kind of unique about me around like age 5, and they got me into some private art lessons, just kind of like once a week. And I took those pretty much all through my adolescence. And I was raised out on a farm in a town called Lyons, and I had a lot of free time, a lot of time in nature.
That's Colorado, right?
Colorado, yeah, and a lot of isolation. And I think that isolation kind of bred a lot of freedom for being creative. I was drawing was my favorite way of entertaining myself, and I think it was kind of an attraction towards creating work and the creative experience. And it was also just kind of a vacuum of there weren't really any other skills that shone forth. I was didn't have a lot of athletic intelligence. I had, maybe some slight dyslexia, so numbers and spelling and words were not really my forte. And the more I focused on art, kind of the less I focused on, I guess, developing other areas. And it just kind of, I kind of painted myself into a creative corner and didn't look back.
Awesome. Well, I think that happens a lot of times with people, especially when they're so gifted in a particular area. It's like, you kind of take all your eggs and put them in one basket so that you can really excel. And although I'm sure you have lots of other talents in other areas, it's when you see that you shine in one given area. I think it's really smart to focus on it like that, and especially to start doing it at such a young age. The results speak for themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it just really became my favorite way for really interacting with reality and other people. You can. From an evolutionary biological standpoint, it was kind of a way of like signaling, a way of kind of creating value and connections with people around me and my group and community. And It was something that people got value out of, and I got a lot of really value making it. So it just kind of created its own momentum from there.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Now, as a digital artist, how do you feel digital art compares to more traditional modalities? Because I'm assuming you started, with more traditional modalities, and
sure.
And how did you end up, choosing and going the kind of digital art path?
Yeah, I started with pencils, and then into markers and colored pencils and Conte chalk and acrylics and oil paints. And I was actually, when I was in high school and kind of the beginning of, I went to an art school, I really focused a lot of my energy on on that kind of the traditional academic drawing and painting. I took private lessons through an atelier in Boulder where we learned cast drawing and anatomy and figure drawing. While I was in college, I took a course where I would dissect cadavers and to learn and get a better understanding of like the fundamental basis of anatomy. I was always, really in awe and studying the works of the old masters, and not just the style of what they were doing, but really the kind of the thought pattern and the modality and how they approached their work and their craft. And I went to a college and I majored in computer animation and fine arts in Sarasota, Florida at the Ringling School of Art and Design.
Okay.
And that's probably when I got my first real taste of the potential of what technology was capable when combined with human imagination and creativity. And as I studied all these masters that I had so much respect for, it became really clear to me that all of these people that we admire, the Michelangelo and the Leonardo and Velasquez, all these guys, like they were, they weren't stuck on they weren't looking at the old cave painters. They were all definitely using the highest elements of creative technology that was available to them, whether it was like a camera obscura or the latest chemistry and pigments and paints and brushes and canvas. And it became really clear to me that if any of these artists were alive in the modern era, that they would be computer animators.
Right.
They would be working in film. They would be pushing they're known because they pushed the limits, not because they were attached
Sure.
to any kind of romantic history of the artists that came before them. And in around 96, I think that's when I first got my hands on a Wacom tablet and started painting digitally with
Hmm.
Photoshop and Corel Painter. And, it was a bit of an awkward transition because I had studied alla prima oil painting, and I think I had at the time, I felt like I had a pretty firm grasp on that and mixing colors and composition. But when I kind of tried to project myself into the future, I could see that the way the technology was going, there were going to be so many opportunities from using the medium of electricity than being really attached towards pigments. And I also saw that when I looked at what artists like Rembrandt did with oil paints, there's not a whole lot to add to that conversation as far as innovation. Obviously, there's subject matter that can be improved upon. There's philosophy. There's a lot of things you can add with that, but technically, there's not a lot that I see artists doing that hasn't been mastered hundreds of years ago with traditional media. And I made a really conscious decision to kind of push off from the shores of what was comfortable and really kind of go all in to this digital medium to see what it could render and how to explore that and how to not only explore that for myself, but to try to push the medium for other artists, like the artists that I used to admire did that for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. That definitely makes sense. I think if I were to ever, as someone who's always looking to what's coming next, if I were to have been in your shoes, I would have thought the exact same thing. It just, using technology to the fullest makes a lot more sense than doing what's been done a million times before, at least for someone with my personality. And it sounds like you kind of lean that same way. I've seen the term electromineralist used as a term to describe your art. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's actually me just trying to make kind of a clear distinction about the medium that I use, because a lot of artists are kind of classified by their mediums, whether they're painters or sculptors.
Hmm.
And when I really look at what's the medium that I'm manipulating with my imagination and my creativity, electromineralism is a term that I came up with that seems to be kind of define it in more clear terms. Because if you look back
Hmm.
at this, the thousands of years of art history we have, that most of human creativity we've been exploring it, and it's been partially limited by basically like more or less the plant and animal kingdom as far as a medium, using, paper is made out of organic materials from, dating back from papyrus to cotton to
Yeah.
trees. A lot of the brushes have been animal hair that we use and wood. And it's been amazing to get us to where we are now, but where we're at now is this medium. When I look at the technology and the laptops and the servers and the computers, there's nothing really foreign or alien about it. It's really just another manipulation of the earth that we have. And so when you look at the computers and you break them down, it's largely a combination of different exotic minerals put together. They've got magnesium and
Yeah.
silicon and quartz crystals and petrochemicals. And the medium that these manipulate is really electricity. And electricity is very fundamental. Our brains are kind of turned on by these electrochemical impulses. Like you could make an argument that dreams are electrical in their nature. Our imagination and our brains work with these electrical impulses. So when I think when you get down to it, the medium of electricity may be one of the purest, even though it's not considered traditional. It's one of the purest mediums of communication and transferring thoughts and images and data that we have. So the electro mineral, I find that's actually a better descriptive term than just digital, when trying to get to kind of an explanation of what it is that I'm using to create these images.
You're creative even in your descriptions, but when you describe it, it makes all the sense in the world. I definitely like that. As far as your inspiration, I mean, is there a particular artist or artist that was or is your biggest inspiration?
I mean, there's a lot of artists that I look to and I admire. All through my life, kind of growing up, there's different artists that are partially formative in my experience, but when it comes to what inspires me the most, currently and probably for the last, I said, decade or so, I'm really more inspired by not so much visual art, but nature in general will always be the greatest inspiration I have. And but I think I draw a lot more inspiration from actually music that I do from visual images. Sometimes, interesting. I find that it's kind of important to kind of keep your artistic palette, your visual palette, a little clean, because you can kind of, they say, all artists, we're all working off of each other, and we're this one big neural net that we're all inspiring each other in different ways. But when I try to, artists, classical music and contemporary artists, I'd say like one of the artists I'm probably inspired the most by would be a musician named Tipper. He's a digital.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's amazing, and it's when I turn
on
his
recent album cover, correct?
I did, yeah. But I mean, that's the kind of thing when I just put on a Tipper album and open up a canvas, and sometimes I get more inspiration off just trying to translate the sounds that he makes into lines and shapes and colors than I would from taking a tour around the Metropolitan Museum. That's something that really turns me on, and it's a challenge that's. It's so subjective, and there's no real end goal to it. I can listen to a song and try 100 times and come up with a different image based off trying to interpret that music. And I think that dynamic between taking a medium that's not visual and translating that into something visual, it's a challenge, and it's something that excites me, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of.
Fascinating. How long does it take you to do a typical piece?
It's really different. There are sometimes it really depends on. I find that it's not as much the amount of time that an image takes. It's really about the quality of my focus and my concentration. When I'm really focused, when I really create the space, which is getting rid of all distractions, giving myself like a long runway to kind of take off with as far as like time. When I'm really focused, it's almost as if I can stretch time out, so to speak. Sometimes I'll record the paintings that I do, like I'll record the screen and I'll feel like 3 or 4 hours have gone by. But when I look at the recording, I can see that it's only been like an hour and a half. But from start to finish, a lot of pieces, they'll take up to several days to several weeks. And what I find interesting is that like the initial sort of like gusto of an image, like I'll be getting the most of the composition and a lot of the major decisions may be done in an evening or 1 or 2 days. But for me, I find that it's like the mastering and the refinement of it can take, the last 10% can take 90% of my time often, just really kind of dialing in a lot of different details and nuances and kind of going back and forth and wrestling with myself until I think it's finally finished. But yeah, some go really fast, some are an uphill battle and can take months before they're ready. But largely, if I were to do an inventory of my hard drive, I've got the halfway finished starts and the unfinished work that there's a landslide of that that hasn't been released because A lot of times if something isn't working, I'm the kind of guy that loves to just start a new idea. My favorite part is the beginning of an image.
Yeah.
The detailing it or refining it can sometimes be a bit of a drudgery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's having made music for many, many years, I definitely can relate to the idea of, you're inspired some moments and a lot comes out at once. And then you can have moments where it's like you're pulling teeth and you have to kind of learn over time to just follow those kind of bursts of energy and inspiration.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's very similar for you. And that kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, do you feel that the artistic visions you create are in any way channeled from your higher self or source or some other being or realm, not of this dimension?
There are definitely a lot of images that I don't feel a particular ownership for as far as what they are. I have a responsibility for the discipline and the training I have for like understanding composition and line and form and color and anatomy. Those are things, those are part of like the architecture of, I don't know if you want to call that skill or talent that I have that help bring those things through. But there's a lot of I find that there's different stages in the creative process, and these different stages, I can encounter them and kind of go through them as a piece progresses. I guess for an example, like at the beginning, like the first stage, I kind of consider it like stages in this conversation. The first stage is usually just like a conversation with my own conscious self. Like I might make some very deliberate decisions that take into account composition, color theory, things that I know that work as far as creating an image. And I can go through that. And then if I get really into a piece and I'm able to kind of lose myself and focus, then sometimes the piece in general, especially when sometimes I work from a very abstract base without any clear intentions or ideas in mind, or I'll follow an emotion or a song. And then if I get through that, it can get to a point where I'm having a conversation with almost like sometimes it feels like my subconscious, where there's elements that start coming in and there's this back and forth. And if I get through that and I kind of if I cross the barriers of the subconscious into deeper realms, then there are elements where the decisions in the painting and the things that come through and the ideas that are coming back, they definitely feel, at sometimes, not all the time, it feels like there is a conversation with a presence or I guess a consciousness or an energy that isn't me at all. And that's rare. It doesn't happen all the time, but like I say, there's an evolution in the conversation that I'm having with the piece. And ultimately it's that third level that I think I and a lot of other artists really strive to. And I theorize a lot that energy, there is in my life. I've definitely encountered this a conscious, creative energy. I've never really. It's not something that I've had. I can't say that I've like seen the face of it, if it even has a face. But it feels like it's eternal. It feels like it's been here with humanity and the universe forever. But there's different. I'd like to think that there's different degrees of that. A lot of artists kind of talk about channeling something. There have been moments in my life where you're just in the throes of the creative experience and things are happening, and I've like looked down at my hands and it's like I don't even recognize my own hands. Like things are happening.
Wow.
It's like maybe it's akin to like maybe like surfing like a massive wave, or it's kind of like having like a lucid dream. Sometimes you're in this lucid dream and you realize that it's a dream, and at that moment it's almost like as soon as you recognize it, it starts fading away. So it's very temporal for sure, and it's elusive, but it definitely exists. But I've been thinking lately that I think there are different energies, if you want to call them like interdimensional or spiritual or spirits, that they do seem to come through at times. But I'm starting to think lately that the caliber of the inspiration that may be channeled or comes down, I think that there is a correlation between the amount of like skill and discipline that somebody has. I mean, I feel like the energy of these entities, that they're very selective, and they, if they come down and they want to drive a car, they're going to want to, drive a car that has a really strong engine. It's
right.
It's like, I think there's a bit of discernment there. And I think the more that an artist, because whatever this energy is, it's tapping into me and my life and my experiences, to the level of how much I've refined my own craft and skill. Because what's conscious in me are just like the muscle memories of understanding, like I said, like anatomy, understanding like line and value and pressure and balance. Like there's all these different sort of very objective harmonies within image making that have been around and been developed and evolved for thousands of years. And that's the part that's me that I think that it utilizes and takes advantage of. And I think that the more an artist has those things, understands those different elements, the farther they can go when something else decides to maybe tap them on the shoulder.
So that sort of answers the question I was going to ask next, and that is, do you feel like as you evolve as an artist that you will, hit that third level, so to speak, more and more often? And it sounds like you do.
Yeah, I can hope. I think a lot of times, sometimes the most important decisions I make when it comes to creating a new piece is sometimes establishing like the right set and setting and kind of container. So the more time I put into, sometimes it's even making sure that the studio that I'm working within is like really pristine, making sure that there's no distractions, selecting a really beautiful playlist. Sometimes I'll meditate. I'll do some breathing exercises. I'll, light some coal and burn some copal or some incense and really make this container for, I want to be inviting as possible to whatever energy may or may not choose to come through in that moment, and give myself plenty of time. These conversations usually happen really late at night when the rest of the world is sleeping and people aren't texting me or emailing me, and I turn the Wi-Fi off. Like that creates a greater probability of refining those conditions for something special to happen.
Interesting. Now, obviously, the art that you create is extremely psychedelic in nature and depicts, spectacular spiritual imagery that appears to transcend the physical world. I think that's probably safe to say. As far as, other inspiration, I've heard it said that you use psychedelics, particularly DMT, as a tool to aid in the creation of your art. Can you tell me about how that plays into it?
Sure. As far as that, I've definitely had experiences with DMT. It's not, I don't think I'd consider DMT really like it's not an art supply on my shelf that I go to very often.
All right.
It's definitely not something. There's other types of psychedelics, particularly like LSD, that are definitely better tools that I've learned to harness and create art during those states.
Sure.
DMT can be something that is, it makes a fundamental change in my consciousness that alters like future decisions that I may make. I've never, there have been situations, there was a period of my life where I was doing a lot of ayahuasca ceremonies, and after a few hours into the ceremony, I would open up a sketchbook and I would start drawing, kind of like sketching out kind of the traces of the Icaros. I would do that. So I guess that would be some creative experiences that are supported by the DMT that's in ayahuasca.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes, DMT is a really tricky one. I've had probably some of the most terrifying experiences in my life with that substance. And so I have a deep amount of respect and a healthy amount of fear around it at times. It's a pretty potent and one of the most potent experiences that I think that I've probably ever had is with that chemical.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask, because I had heard that was one that you used, and I'd never asked you that. So it's interesting to hear that it's actually not something that you lean on so much, and you've used others. But typically, it's not just to kind of clarify, so you're typically not in a psychedelic state, you'd say, when you're making art. That's just something that you've used from time to time.
Yeah, there's definitely been times. I mean, for the amount of art that I make, if I was in those states all the time, it would be
You'd be tripping constantly.
it'd be highly unsustainable as a practice.
Right. Okay.
I mean, the real goal is to, and I think, is to have those type of experiences. And there's usually lessons that come through. There's some questions that I can ask, and it's really about learning different elements and then taking that into your normal default operating world. If to be an artist and have to rely on those type of tools, like I said, I don't think that's a mentally sustainable practice to have.
That would seem more like a crutch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really, like I said, I've heard that from a few different places, over the last couple of years. And I was just really curious about it because I thought the same thing. But at the same time, when you look at the art that you're creating, it is so psychedelic and so, otherworldly. It's kind of like one of those things. Well, shoot, maybe it is, how he's tapping into this. But what you're saying makes a lot more sense. So I had to get that question out there.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, really, I think reality in general is really psychedelic. My dreams are incredible. I mean, I've had more profound, visual dream spaces than I have in most ayahuasca circles. And I think it's really just being open to the psychedelic nature of consciousness in general. So you don't need to necessarily have these sort of like these mental boosters. Sure. Psychedelics can definitely be, I think particularly with LSD and mushrooms, they can act as kind of creative steroids of sorts. I think that Sure. in the LSD experiences, they take the kind of the neocortex shape recognition technology and really, turn that dial up to like 11 or 12 sometimes. But it's something that also just needs to be handled with a lot of reverence and a lot of respect. And it's really, I'd really caution anyone not to abuse that, because if it did become a crutch, that would be I think that would be a pretty slippery slope to go down.
I completely agree. I think it's one of those things used in the right context and so forth. It can be extremely healing and opening and creative, and abused like anything, it can be very destructive. So yeah, I think that's an important distinction. So, okay, your art definitely has this very, like I've alluded to, and people who've seen it, and hopefully everyone went over and checked it out before they listened to this podcast. If they haven't ever seen it, it's obviously very, spiritual in nature and so forth, like we've discussed. And I mean, that leads me to wonder, what are your thoughts on the ultimate nature of reality? I mean, spiritually speaking, what do you think is really going on behind the scenes of this 3D reality?
Gosh, I wish I had a great answer for you there. I've definitely had lots of theories throughout my life, but for the amount of searching that I've done and experiences that I've gone after, it's kind of like they say like that. The more I know, the less I know, or the more I realize Sure. that I know nothing about what's going on. For me to sit here and try to speculate on the great mystery of consciousness, I think would be foolish. Right. I think I'm just in love with the mystery of it all. I'm just totally overtaken by the ambiguity of what's really happening. And yeah, there's times where I think I get a glimpse and I think I get a better idea. And then just to find that something else happens that totally destroys like any semblances of a theory that I may have. And, I've grown to really, I think, respect and enjoy and love the mystery of it all. And I love different theories. I love learning about different things. I really like a lot of the work of people like Ken Wilber that study all the different components and try to create kind of an integral idea and look at some of the similarities between religions and cultures and ideas. I believe in love. I believe in like the principle of not harming other people. And I believe humans are meant to be creative. I think that really like art is, I guess it's probably my form of spirituality, because a lot of times people see that, you can look at the fruit or the product of what's being created. And I mean, in a way, like I was saying this the other day, the art that I make, it's really just like the residue of the life that I live. And a lot of the images that I'm making, when I get to that third stage, that third level, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it's almost like a record of my conversation with spirit or God or whatever you want to call it. Like these images are the ways that I connect with that infinite mystery. And,
Right.
the medium, I mean, one of the reasons I think that I'm attracted to digital art is because I feel that I can have like the deepest and the most amazing type of conversation through the medium of electricity. The things that happen, the amount of ideas and shapes and components that I can explore digitally are so much more robust than if I was having that conversation and the medium was the tip of a charcoal pencil. As far as the
Right.
information and the free flow of information that goes both ways, I mean digital, this electromineralism, that's kind of that's the vehicle of and the means of my conversation with God.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What is your thought on the burgeoning transformational festival scene that, of course, has been a huge supporter and I'm sure promotional vehicle for yourself as well as, all other visionary artists? I mean, how would you say it has helped to raise awareness of your art?
Well, to raise awareness, yeah, it's been amazing. I think I've really kind of evolved myself within that scene. It's created a kind of amazing container for me to explore these different realms of consciousness, and from an artistic perspective, really the ability it's given me to interact with people and understand kind of the deeper needs that people have for art in their lives. It's brought me all around the world to different festivals, different trance festivals all over the planet, and that's been really exciting to explore that. And I think that's definitely how I've made a name for myself, and I've built up a community and a tribe of people that support me through the exposure I've had at these different events. And in recent years, I've put a lot of energy into creating large-scale galleries at these events like Burning Man and Boom, and I find that it's really valuable to, instead of I put more energy into showing my art at festivals than I do in the traditional galleries and cities, because I find that the festivals create the environment for people to be in different states of consciousness and encounter the art, which is in a lot of ways that's where it's really meant to be viewed and be seen and be experienced.
Sure.
So that part's really amazing.
Yeah. So you would say it's been instrumental in your whole journey. When was your first experience at one of these sorts of festivals, and was it like a light bulb moment for you in regards to what your future was going to look like?
It was, for sure. I think probably it was my first Burning Man, and I think that was around 2003, if I'm remembering correctly, might be the first burn that I went to. And I went there by myself. I didn't know anybody that had gone to Burning Man before. I had just kind of seen it on different websites and over the internet. And I kind of just finally made the commitment and decision to go by myself. And yeah, it really broke me open in a lot of ways. Just seeing, I guess my creativity and being an artist, it was really an isolated creative experience. I was doing it, in my room or in my studio or by myself late at night. And when I first Burning Man, the thing I was the most overwhelmed by wasn't just like the magnitude or the scale of the art, but it was just seeing these communities of people that were together making art, making these theme camps, putting on these stages, and the amount of people that had the ability to express their creativity live in front of groups of people. And that was something that really stuck with me. That was something that I really wanted to find out how, it was kind of a deeper challenge of how could I interact creatively and be more vulnerable and, and share it with more people, like in the moment.
Yeah. Where do you see that whole movement going from here? Obviously, Burning Man, first year that I went was right around then 2005. And, really, then that was the very, transformative experience for me as well. And in the last few years, it just seems, especially on the West Coast here in California and Colorado, where you're at, and there's so many festivals now, smaller festivals popping up, and it's just growing and growing and growing. Where do you see it all going from here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I go back and forth on that a lot. I think I think creatively, I almost feel like there was like the wave crested as far as this being like a really beautiful, organic, spontaneous kind of movement, like around 2006, 2007. Like some of the things that were happening back then were so unbelievably magical and spontaneous, and these groups of amazing people just figuring things out in the moment, and it felt really, really ecstatic and alive and vibrant. And I think over the years, I've seen a certain amount of kind of monotony that gets created within these. It's almost like there's a conformity of counterculture. I look out and people are kind of, there's a counterculture uniform that's created now. Like it's starting to become its own stereotype, like a bro or a juggalo or anything else.
Right.
It starts feeling a bit engineered, and especially we get into the commodification of creativity, which is a really kind of unfortunate thing that most artists have to be involved with. It's my least favorite part of how to be creative and be functional and successful in a culture. But I mean, I think the place that I like seeing it, I went to Lightning in a Bottle this year, and I think for a little while I was kind of fighting how much this really unique counterculture scene was to me and my friends. And at first, there were years where I had a real resistance to seeing it become more mainstream, but I've recently changed my views where I think what's important is for this festival culture to become, I want it to become as mainstream as soon as possible. I want it to almost like sell out as soon as it can, and the reason is because I think as soon as what our underground counterculture becomes mainstream, that creates that sows the seeds and the soil and the foundation for a new underground to emerge. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about this underground is already kind of running its course. I'm excited to see what the next generation is going to do. I think, that's where this came from. And I think that is the cycle of culture. So as soon as this one grows up, there's something new can kind of come from the ashes of that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think it's an interesting point for someone like yourself. It's in some sense, you can see the stereotypes. It's grown stale on some level. The huge amount of creativity that's there is kind of pigeonholed into these certain things that maybe don't appear so creative anymore. But I think the positive thing about it is for those that maybe are having a very first experience. This was their very first Burning Man or Lightning in a Bottle, and that same awe that you had in 2003, they're having now, and it helps to open them up in some sort of way. And I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that I put a lot of energy. There's a series of years I made these massive theme camps at Burning Man, and it's why I put a huge amount of effort into creating these galleries, where a lot of times my participation in these events, it isn't to have an amazing time or to, lose myself on the dance floor. I'm often there really in service to, like I said, those first timers. I want to create that, amazing El Circo Saturday night that I saw in 2003 for someone that's going to be there for their first time. I think there's a lot of value and there's a lot of importance in that and moving things forward. But like you said, there's a danger in the conformity, because there comes a point where visionary culture just becomes another cage for someone's consciousness, because I think, imagination is unlimited. What we can think of, there's no boundaries of what human beings are capable of making and expressing and exploring. And a lot of times these people can get into these little cultural ruts and cages that kind of confine that unlimited potential into a certain kind of architecture of thoughts and styles and dance moves and whatever. And so it's just something I think everyone needs to be really aware of and cognizant of that. We always need to make space for what's coming next and not get too attached to what is now.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on, you hear a lot of talk about creating a permanent kind of, permanent village infrastructure and so forth. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that can be really interesting. I've never seen one myself that I say has been totally, totally realized. Sure. I put a lot of energy and a lot of work with the family that runs the Boom Festival. And they're one of the closest that I've seen to that they have kind of an infrastructure that's there all year round, and they keep kind of building upon that. Festivals like Shambhala have stages that they add to every year. I think from just like a conservation of energy, it makes a lot of sense to be constantly, building year after year on something instead of just building and taking it down and building it, taking it down. There's just a lot of wasted energy that I see in part of that. Yeah. I think that's something that I think that's something that's worthy of encouraging. It'd be great to see some more permanence. As long as that permanence is also, it's kind of like tempered with, responsibility. It'd be great to see more people
and flexibility, living, right?
Flexibility and I don't say sustainability, but a responsibility as far as it'd be great to see them, digging wells for their own water and creating more solar panels and being more responsible and efficient with how they use their energy. So it's something because I think that's where real freedom is freedom is when you're not relying on someone else for your energy in these different things. I think festivals are a great model to start exploring that idea more.
Yeah. And there's so many new, methods of generating energy and so forth coming out all the time, and advances in technology. It's such an interesting and perfect time, it seems, for it. So that's definitely an area that I'm very interested in seeing develop and hoping to be involved with developing, in some level. But
yeah,
I was very curious how you thought, what your take was on that sort of thing. You also just created artwork for the 50th anniversary final Fare Thee Well show for the legendary rock band, the Grateful Dead, that actually took place in the last week. Let me say congratulations on that. I mean, that must have been incredible to participate in. Tell me about that experience. How did you get involved with that? And just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'm still kind of recovering.
I bet.
Got like a Grateful Dead hangover still from.
Yeah. What a thing to have achieved.
Yeah, I'm processing a lot. It came from a couple different directions. I had a relationship with Mickey Hart's manager. We were talking about doing some album art a little while ago, and so there was a connection there. And then Howard Cohen, the manager, I think he contracted out with Obscura Digital to be kind of like the main head of the visual component for Mickey's Drums in Space section. And I've known Obscura and I've worked with them for over 10 years. So it was kind of like a perfect storm of different components coming together. And they pulled me on the project. I mean, maybe like a month ago. I mean, it was only maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago that it became like a real thing. And we started working on it. One of my friends from Obscura, Travis, had a house in Tahoe, and he invited the whole team to come down and start kind of working and collaborating together. But it was a very kind of spontaneous and impulsive thing. We never really had. There was a lot of really loose type of kind of boundaries around it, where we. Up until the shows, we didn't really know how long we were making visuals for. We didn't know exactly what the music for, because it was really just Mickey and Billy kind of jamming out in their Drums in Space section of it. So there was a lot of content that we created ahead of time, thinking it would work, and then you kind of get there and you realize that it's very different than you imagined. So there was a lot of creative thinking on our feet creating that, and I will say that I think I definitely totally underestimated how potent an experience that it would be for myself and just in general. Like I definitely, obviously I've been exposed to a lot of Grateful Dead music. when I was 15, I remember got a tape of Terrapin Station, and I think it was just when I started experimenting with some marijuana, and I remember just putting the headphones on my Walkman and just going on some really deep journeys to Terrapin Station and some of John Perry Barlow's lyrics. And, but I never would have considered myself like a dead head, up until really this weekend. And I'm telling you, like 5 shows back to back. It's like, I'm still trying to really put it in, like contextualize it and kind of create different metaphors. But I think it was probably Saturday night is when the switch got turned on for me, because I was looking at it from a lot of different angles too. There was an article I had read, written by a researcher named Jan Irving, that he puts forth the idea that the Grateful Dead is like it's a massive like mind control program, that it was a part of counterculture, totally like engineered by the CIA. And so I was kind of looking at it through that lens, what is it that's so attractive about this music? I came to kind of understand, I think a lot of it has to do with some of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The sense of belonging was unbelievable. I mean, that first night, seeing 60, 70,000 people all there at Levi's Stadium, just in this unbelievable excitement and anticipation for this concert, seeing it all build up, seeing the stadium kind of fill in from 0 to 60,000. And I mean, that moment when they first just hit Truckin' was their first song. And I mean, the wave of like sheer adulation and excitement and human joy that resonated from like the back of the bleachers all the way to the stage was, I've never seen so many human beings in one place happy ever. I've never seen so many people on the same page. And that was unbelievable to experience. And then to be able to add to that experience by creating these visuals during Drums in Space, which is kind of the most psychedelic part of the evening. I mean, it was a rush, beyond comparison. I don't have any other experiences that can really, that live up to what that was. And it was amazing. And I think it was really, it hit me around Saturday night in Chicago. I mean, there were a lot of really amazing highlights, but I think that set was a particularly deep psychedelic set for me. I kind of started in one direction, and during it, I really just went off script and started doing some things with the visuals and particles that I didn't expect that I was going to do. And it just the creative current was really there, and I could really.
So you're creating it live.
Yeah, I'm using my Wacom, and I'm creating these dynamic particles that kind of build and undulate, and I'm trying to interpret the music the best I can. So I have particles that explode on command, like during the drums and the percussion set, and during the space, I have these particles that just kind of they grow and undulate and move as I'm moving my pen up and down the tablet, trying to kind of follow the curves of the harmony and the rhythms. And some of them, I have the ability to kind of build them on top of themselves. So they just kind of these sort of scenes start to kind of like grow and evolve. And yeah, there was a moment where I was just there with the music and the audience. And instead of looking at my screen or the playback monitor, I was really, my field of view was like the entire stage, looking at both huge LED screens, just creating something in front of everybody. And that was super magic. And so I kind of come off that experience just super high from just the excitement that was. And I can feel the energy of the crowd when they're following what I'm following. Like sometimes I can hear the gasps or the yells or the excitement, but I was really one with the experience. And then after that, they had a few more songs, and it was when they played one more Saturday night. And because we're in the middle of the stadium, we have this awesome sort of like mission control center with the sound booth. So we're directly in the middle. We're elevated. I mean, it's arguably probably the best seats in the entire house.
Yeah.
And they're playing one more Saturday night. And I mean, the excitement was just so palatable and tangible. And as they're playing it, me and my friends, Jedi and Pacha, they're part of my team. They were out there with me. and we're there dancing and listening to the song, and you just realize, we're like, wait a second, they've been singing this One More Saturday Night song for 50 years, and this is it. This is the One More Saturday Night. Like there's no more Saturday nights after that. This is the one more Saturday night they've been singing about for 50 years. And just to be there and be part of it, like and
to be like a part of the band or an extension of the band in a sense, right?
Yeah. And that was, that's, if the CIA central, like, mind control frequency, if they were to hit the button for me, that's when they hit the button. And I'm just like, oh damn. I'm not getting out of this. Like I'm on the team forever now. It's like, oh shit. There's no escape.
I officially have FOMO. So it sounds absolutely spectacular. What an experience. What a unique lifetime experience that so few people would ever think about having. So congratulations on that, man.
Geez.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I just have so much more respect I had a lot of respect for the band too, but now I get it. Like now I drank the Kool-Aid all the way. Right. And it's just like for even what the band, and on Sunday it was totally different, because Sunday, just the set list, there was a lot of celebration, but I mean, they were, it was much more like, Don't Fade Away. They had a lot, it was a lot more somber. They went into Terrapin Station, which is like An Estimated Prophet, which are my favorite Grateful Dead songs ever. They played those. Yeah. They ended their encore with Touch of Grey. And so there was just like the emotional curve of the whole evening was different. There was moments where I was just bawling and crying, it was like, and I had to, I got to compare it to the experience. It's like getting a taste and an exposure and addicted to like the most amazing drug on the planet, and then having it,
realizing the supply's gone,
and then it's gone. It's just like I'm like having like the withdrawals of that. It's like falling in love right when the relationship is ending. So it's like I'm like tragically fortunate. It's so bittersweet to have that happen. But just watching Bob Weir on stage, like especially some of the last songs, like this guy, he was putting 100% into everything. Like there was no, especially Sunday night, there was like no holding back. And just to see this guy, center stage, rim lit, and just giving it everything he had, like the band in general. And there's such a deeper, I guess, kind of like emotional arc to, their life and what they've been through. And here are these guys on stage, and they've like lost Jerry, like their best friend isn't even there anymore. And just seeing Bob like with his guitar, like this was, they're called the Grateful Dead. They have all these skeletons in their iconography. And this guy on stage giving 100%, it was just like this. It was the most beautiful metaphor that I've ever seen for, the endurance and the creativity of man just making a stand and just saying like, just fuck you to death. That's what it was for me. Right. It was just this and I could feel this concert and the energy created and the sound, like the sound waves out of Soldier Field, just like cascading like into the universe. I could see it just like echoing out like through our solar system into the galaxy. And I know that's kind of a hippie thing to say, but I just felt it, man.
You definitely drank the Kool-Aid.
And I got to the point where it's like, you know what? If this is the CIA, like they write a hell of a lick, and if they're listening right now, like I'm ready. Like, just give me a job. Like, if you guys are responsible, I want to work for you. I will betray this counterculture in a second. Because you guys put on a hell of a show.
That's so funny, man. So funny. Well, that whole description of your experience, I feel like, although part of me feels, bittersweet. Wow, what did I just miss? I could have went up to San Francisco or Chicago and caught one of these, and now it's over forever. But hearing it from you, I appreciate that. That was such an incredible description of your experience, and I feel like I vicariously through you got a little taste of that experience. So
and I guess for me, I'm just glad that now I know what everybody is talking about. Like I get it now. Like and the thing is, it's unfortunate too, because I'll like people have always said, like, you've just got to go to a show, you've got to experience it. That's what I've always heard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're right. You do have to. Like, I've been listening to their music my whole life, and it never really hit me. Like, I just never. And I've tried to get it lots of times, and now I get it now, because every time I'll hear one of these. I mean, they played through an amazing amount of their. I think they only repeated one song throughout the 5 shows. And I was like listening on Monday. I was listening to their music like on my headphones all day, like all through the airport.
Wow.
Like every song that I had that had been on playlists that I was listening to a lot, just researching it, making this content.
Yeah.
Every one of these songs is completely different now. It's like either I wasn't hearing it, but now when I listen, it's not like I'm listening to the songs, but the songs they're like a bookmark to the experience that I had with the song. So I'm not even really listening to the song, but through hearing the song, I'm like reliving what it was
that
like
emotion.
to be there at Levi Stadium or Soldier Field. And now I get it. But the unfortunate thing is, like, I'll never be able to explain it to anybody else, or, my kids or anybody, because now they're not going to do it anymore. So it's kind of like I'm very, I might be a little isolated, but I feel like I'm also connected to all of the Grateful Dead fans out there now. I'm glad that I didn't, that's kind of a bucket list thing, I guess, is like, now I have that experience, and now I'm so much more tapped into the community and everybody else. And there'll be different things in the future. There'll be shows. I mean, there'll never be anything like that was, but yeah, I'm super fortunate. Like I said, it's kind of heartbreaking. To people that haven't been, I'm like, well, I was talking to one guy the next day that was in Chicago, and he wasn't there. He'd never seen a show. And I'm like, well, you saved yourself the heartbreak of like falling in love with them and realizing it's never going to happen again. So
that's looking on the bright side.
That's the bright side of it all. But yeah, no, I mean, the magic is real. And I'm not easily convinced, and they definitely convinced me.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That sounds like quite the experience. Now, speaking of drinking the Kool-Aid, when you and I met, we got into some really fascinating discussions about what some may refer to as conspiracy theories, or discrepancies between what those in power want us to believe and what is actually going on. And I'm curious, we talked quite a bit, and I'm sure this could be a whole show unto itself, but what are some of the theories that you have heard and researched, or the number one theory you have heard and researched that you feel have the most credence?
Well, actually, I did a recent podcast, my podcast, which is called Midnight Sunrise Radio.
Right.
And our last show, you can check it out. It was all about conspiracies, and we really get into kind of conspiracy theory versus conspiracy fact. But we had a researcher on named Ole, that he really just specializes in the conspiracy fact, like really only conspiracies that you can tell have like absolute, like, objective fundamental documents and truth around this thing. So there's lots of really like far out conspiracies that, I support or I want to believe, but I know that don't have anything backing it up. But when we had this show talking to him, the one conspiracy that it seems to definitely have the most amount of credence and evidence behind it, really kind of gets back to the JFK assassination, and
Okay.
After hearing him, if I was going to say, if there's one sort of thing as far as Americans that I think have the most impact on us, the research that he's done on that conspiracy, when he wouldn't even call it a conspiracy at this point, it's unbelievably alarming, and the consequences that it really has, and what he kind of puts forth is that, this was an assassination that was put together by many different, underground elements within the government and the mob. And what makes it something that's really important to look at is, he says that after there are a lot of different moments in America's history where, we turned a corner, but he says that basically from that one, we've never had a genuine president after that assassination, that like the whole course of America has gone in a completely different direction from that moment forward. And there's a lot of things. It's when you talk about credibility, there's just, if you look at the work that he's done, there's just an amazing amount of research that once you look at it, there's not a lot of denying that. So I'd say as far as like the litany of conspiracy theories, that's one that I think is probably the most credible and has some of the most like far-reaching undertones on what we consider this country to be and its agenda and its motivations and the impact that it's had on, the rest of the entire world.
Right. Wow. Mm-hmm. And that podcast you have recently released. Is that out there where people can hear it?
We started our new season with it for sure. So it's on iTunes and SoundCloud and all that.
Okay, cool. I definitely will be tuning into that as well. So, cool. Well, so one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, you recently helped to create a fascinating new technology that creates a 360-degree visual experience of visionary art. Tell me about your involvement with that.
Sure. Well, my role in that is more or less kind of content, not necessarily creating. The technology was created by a company called Full Dome Pro. They're based out in Thailand, and it's a team that I've been partnering with. I give them access to all of my digital files and layered files and images, and they have a really amazing team that takes those images and builds like 3-dimensional worlds in like Cinema 4D and different animating softwares. And then they bring these worlds to life, and then they render it through like a virtual 360 camera. And then it's then projected into, planetarium, like full 360 domes. And it's something. We had our first dome show at the Fisk Planetarium in Boulder. I just came back from the Alder Planetarium in Chicago. We're looking at doing a show there. The next big show we have is going to be in Kiev in the Ukraine. We've got a planetarium at the end of July. We're going to do a show, and wow, I'm really excited about this. This is definitely going to be a big part of what I'm going to be focusing on for the rest of this year and probably the next coming years, because as artists, I'm always trying to bring people a different type of experience. And when you look at a painting, I said before, like the images are really just like the residue of the experiences that I have. They're like these little snapshots of infinity, like a little postcard. They're not the experience. They're just kind of like this finger pointing at the moon. But what we've been able to achieve with these we call it the iRes, these 360 experiences, it's the closest thing that I've ever been able to do to really take somebody into a painting. Like these paintings start coming alive and the camera goes through them, and within the space it really feels, it gives the best kind of illusion of 3D space without having glasses or anything like that, and you're able to experience it with like a couple hundred people at the same time. And I'd say that's definitely like the peak of my sort of like visual mind-blowing potential right now is what we can do in these planetariums. And so we're working now. They're working kind of around the clock, making new content for this show. And once we have enough of it together, we're going to be launching like a larger, U.S. and world, like global dome tour, and using the infrastructure of all these amazing planetariums that exist in all the major cities that are all looking for kind of new and interesting content to be projected onto them. And we're looking at doing a kind of a sample. We did a sample of that at Lightning in a Bottle.
I heard this. Everyone came up to me saying, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" afterwards, and I somehow managed to miss it. And I just heard that it's absolutely fantastic experience. So I can't wait to go to a planetarium, because I can only imagine it will be, that much grander in a environment like a planetarium.
Yeah, it's deep tech. It's definitely, like I said, I'm not easily impressed by a lot of things. And the first time I saw this, it was just like, oh, this is what's next. This is the next new thing. And it's the next new thing is going to be the virtual reality space. And a lot of the content that we're building for this 360 dome we're also building it to port it into the virtual reality platform as well, because that's going to be another area that, I don't think people, it's like you haven't seen anything. You haven't seen anything yet. Once you can see
it's right around the corner too.
It's right around the corner. Yeah. It's going to be the next big thing. And with its own, amazing and terrifying implications as well. But hopefully,
Absolutely.
Me and my team, we're devoted to trying to use this technology for the powers of good, while we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of those things people are going to look back on when these virtual reality systems that are coming to market, and literally in the coming months. I think it's one of those things we're going to look back on, 10 years, 20 years down the road and be like, wow, remember before we had the internet? It's the same kind of thing, and even probably more grand.
It's I mean, it's unfortunate. I can foresee a situation where in the future we reminisce and wax poetically about the days when people just look down at their phones. Wasn't it nice when people just look down at their phones on the bus and on the BART? That was just so nice. They could still look up because, we're headed towards a thing where people are just going to have head masks on their face or contact implants. It's however dark.
Never leave their bedroom.
Dystopian we think things are right now, it's gonna look warm and intimate towards the future we might be headed into.
Totally. You said it very well. It's so exciting and inspiring and terrifying all at once because
oh my gosh,
so many directions it can go.
Oh geez, yeah. I mean, it has the potential, like Taryn said, to totally change our whole idea of what being really means. And they've really, I've talked to some people that are really at the cutting edge of virtual technology, and they say that some of the new stuff that they have that hasn't been released, some of these prototypes, they get to the new buzzword you're going to be hearing a lot as far as evaluating the impact. It's this term presence, and so people are going to rate things. It's like, oh well, this app has a presence as 10 presence, or presence of 7, and that's going to be what a lot of the developers are shooting for, and they're really finding that. What it takes to kind of trick the brain into and the conscious and subconscious into reality, it's really just a combination of factors. When they have with 360 sound, when they get the right frame rate, when they get the right amount of polygons and engines that can process that, it'll still never be reality. I mean, let's just face it. From an artistic standpoint, when you look at the density and the poly count of molecular reality, there isn't a supercomputer out there that I think we're capable of really mimicking that. However, there is a certain element of factors that can be created that will be unbelievably convincing. And it's a brave new world that we're heading into, recklessly and fearlessly. So
of course, as always. So obviously, you have your hands in so many exciting things, and it's been so great to hear about them. Is there any other projects in the works that you want to share?
Sure.
I mean, as if that isn't enough. What can we expect from you in the future?
Well, it's my job is I try to be a blow people's minds, and humans have an unbelievably fast recovery level of their mind. You blow someone's mind Friday and they want to get it blown Saturday. So no, you got their recovery rate is alarming. So I'm always it's a never ending struggle to find new ways to break people's consciousness open. But the other project that I'm really excited about is called the Phaedroid Collective, and Phaedroid is it's the name of a performance act between me and my partner Phaedrana, and it's a project where the live visuals I create, like the visuals I did at Grateful Dead that are driven kind of in the moment with a Wacom tablet, I do these projections onto Phaedra as a dancer. And these projections, they enhance and they add this whole different dimension to a dancer's movement. And we've been kind of incubating. We did this pretty heavily on the festival circuit for several years. Then we took a little bit of a break to regroup and reform. And now before it was just it was like a 2-man act where I was projecting onto her dancing, but now we have the capabilities of having multiple dancers and multiple projection streams onto dancers. And so that's another big project that we're working on now, and finding the right kind of venues and people to collaborate with to bring that to a bigger audience. And so I guess that's cool. That and the dome, and maybe more dead stuff and more tipper stuff is for things for people to be looking out on the horizon.
Yeah, I'd say all of that is super exciting. So that should keep two of you, your clones included, all busy.
Definitely.
So as my audience knows, I always love to hear any stories of synchronicity or serendipity or, positive paranormal events. I'm assuming someone as fascinating as you are would have such a story that you'd be willing to share.
Yeah.
What do you got for me?
Totally. I have so many, and I'm sure if I had more time, I could probably think of one that was even more amazing than this one. But the one that came to mind when you asked that question, I think it must have been, I'm going to say it was like maybe around the year, it was like early 2000s. And I had graduated. Yeah, it was maybe 2001. And I graduated from art school, and I had a job in California. I quit my job, and I decided I just wanted to go to Europe and draw portraits for a few months and tour Europe. And so I was on this like solo European tour, going through all these cities, just drawing portraits on the street and just living this spontaneous artist life, totally free. And it was a really beautiful time. And I wound up in Czech Republic and in Prague, and it was kind of just I had planned just to be passing through there, but I ended up just getting totally sucked into the vortex that is Prague. And back in 2001, it's a very different Prague than it is now. It was way less commercialized, and there's a real, if you've ever been, there is a deeply supernatural element to the entire city. And I think I was there for almost a couple weeks, just immersing myself in the culture, going to these beautiful, like underground, like organic dance parties, like not techno raves, but like actual instruments and communities and people.
Cool.
And I went to this one party, and I think I was up all night just getting totally blown open. And the whole city, the whole experience started to feel like a dream. It felt like I kind of was questioning reality. I was questioning whether I was dreaming or not, whether I was just in this like long lucid dream that I was going to wake up from, because the elements and the amount of coincidences, things just started feeling like really like staged, like I was in kind of a movie set. And I was walking around, and I was just having this like, this argument in my mind, whether it was real or not, or if I was just making this up. And I kind of come to the conclusion that like, nah, this is totally bullshit. Like this is just me just drawing these inferences, and there's nothing really supernatural happening. And I'm walking around, and I started like whistling this song, and I was whistling the tune from is that song, like I've got no strings, like I got no string, like so I'm whistling this theme. And then like I turn the corner, and there I see this like this store and this big window display with this like Pinocchio marionette just like hanging there.
Wow.
And it's like, and I could just like the song, like I did, like the whistle just came to this like abrupt stop when I saw Pinocchio. And that's when I just had to surrender and just give up. And whatever was happening was going to happen. So
that is cool. That's a good one. Wow. So how did you interpret it as, okay,
that was just give up. That was like, there is something supernatural, and it's way bigger than my monkey brain is ever going to figure out. So instead of just fighting it or struggling it, I'm just going to enjoy it. And maybe this is a dream, and maybe it isn't, but there's no point resisting it anymore. Just dive in.
Yeah. That is a cool story. Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Well, Android, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Like I said, I was looking very forward to picking your brain, and it was lived up to my expectations. You've had so much interesting to share, and I know all my listeners will certainly enjoy getting a glimpse inside your miraculous mind. And before we go, I would like to ask one last question. It's my put you on the spot question, although you're very quick on your feet, so I don't see it putting you two on the spot. What is the meaning of life according to Android Jones?
Man, that's kind of putting on the spot question. Like, well, I said before, I've known enough to know that I don't really know much at all anymore.
Right.
But I think where I put my energy is that we have this amazing. We can look out in these telescopes and see this incredible universe that we're part of. And, obviously there's this massive universe out there, but I think that each of us have an unbelievable universe inside of our own minds. And I think part of my meaning is really exploring this inner universe and finding a way where my exploration of this universe can create a valuable experience that means something to other people. It's like I've got a lot of love for life. I have a lot of passion, and I find because my meaning is being able to translate that passion into artwork and experiences that other people can share and hopefully inspire and cultivate more passion and love in other people. And so that's where I have my meaning today.
Beautifully said. And you certainly are a huge inspiration to many, many people. And I foresee you becoming even, more of an inspiration to a larger and larger audience. You're such a talent. And I appreciate you once again for taking the time to share with me here today. And, we'll have to circle back around down the road and do this again and
Great.
check in on some of these wonderful projects that you're working on.
Sounds great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me and helping me get all these thoughts out of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone, be sure to check out androidjones.com, where, of course, you can purchase Android Jones artwork and see, keep tabs on all the wonderful things he's got going on.
Great.
Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. Until next time, remember, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Take care, everyone.